Literary houses are like the Disneyland of literature.
I get the attraction of writers' houses. It's the thing you do when you're extraordinarily bored. Has that been your experience, though, in going to writers' houses? Like, do you have the
You know what? My experience is like, God, some of these writers rich.
This is Dead Writers, a show about great American authors and where they lived.
I'm Tess Chicalico.
And I'm Brock Clark.
A decade ago, I became obsessed with saving Harriet Beecher Stowe's house in Maine. Then I did save it, but I'm still obsessed with literary houses, and not just Stowe's.
I wrote a novel called An Arsonist's Guide to Writers' Homes in New England because I couldn't figure out why anyone goes to writers' homes, let alone tries to save them.
You'd think I'd hate Brock.
But you're my colleague. You can't hate me.
It's true. That would be awkward.
So instead of hating each other, we made this show.
The Hawthorne House in Raymond is unassuming. It's a white wooden house that sits on a corner where two small roads intersect in a leafy neighborhood a few blocks from Sebago Lake. And two unassuming Raymond residents, Abel Bates and Tom Ewing, let us in. The house that's so well preserved on the outside turns out to be pretty empty on the inside. The second floor has been taken out, and most of the house is just one big room.
After they left, the house was vacant, obviously, and it's been used for a number of things. It was, I think, a staged stop at one time, because this used to be the main road that came down. 302 bypasses it now.
Abel knows the ins and outs of this house. He's the one who's been fixing the leaks, installing new windows, and a heat pump. And Abel thinks that the inside of the house was torn out in the late 19th century when Nathaniel Hawthorne's relative, who was a minister, decided to use the building as a meeting house.
And then after that, again, it went vacant again, and it was in pretty much disrepair until the Hawthorne Association was formed in 1922.
1922? Yeah. Did you get that? The Hawthorne Association was formed in 1922. And community members like Abel and Tom have kept it going ever since, with the help of Hawthorne lovers from around the world.
We had a couple from England that's been here 2 or 3 times now, and they've been just very generous and very, I mean, this woman is a real nut on Hawthorne's life. We had a Japanese guy. Apparently Hawthorne is very popular in Japan.
Nathaniel Hawthorne has been very popular in the U.S., too, since his novel, The Scarlet Letter, was published in 1850. It was one of the first mass-printed books in the country, and 2,500 copies of it sold within the first 10 days of it being in stores. A staggering amount at that time. It's still taught in most U.S. high schools, and if you didn't read it then, you might have heard it referenced in movies like Easy A with Emma Stone, or Crazy Stupid Love with Emma Stone again. The Emma Stone-Hawthorne connection could maybe be its own podcast episode. Anyway, it just goes to show how relevant his writing still is.
Yeah, I was going to ask that you both are so well informed, vested in stories about Hawthorne, but do you have favorite Hawthorne stories or novels or anything?
You want me to be really honest?
Yes, I do.
I haven't read very much of Hawthorne since I was in high school.
Did you read Scarlet Letter in
Oh,
high
of course,
school?
everybody.
It's obligatory reading. For me, that's more interesting is the story of Nathaniel Hawthorne himself when he was here. Mm-hmm. I mean, they're really quite kind of interesting little anecdotes about this sort of thing. That's what I know. He broke his leg at one point, and
well, he was lame when he came up here.
was it already?
Yeah. I don't know. He had some kind of an issue with his leg. Yeah. I don't know exactly what it was, but I know that he had a cane or a crutch. And at some point, I think the Raymond Casco Historical Society has what they think is his crutch.
Is his crutch, yeah. But then, you go further on when he, because he's never really made much money, and he became very good friends with Franklin Pierce when they were boating together, and Franklin Pierce made him a consul to the UK, and I think that helped him along financially. I think actually Franklin Pierce helped him along financially in a lot of different ways.
And
like most of these artists, they're not noticed until they're
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 dead.
dead.
Yeah, writers all need benefactors.
Right, exactly. But he was friends with Longfellow was there, and so it's kind of fun when you read all that history.
Have you seen the book that?
Tom and Abel know a lot of those Hawthorne stories, especially about his time in Raymond, like which rock he liked to fish from as a kid or where he took his canoe. Actually, the way Tom and Abel talk about the house is a lot like how Hawthorne remembered his time here. He didn't actually live here for very long. He spent the summer of 1816 here when he was 12, and then again 3 years later, just a few more months. Even though Hawthorne spent less than a year in this house, it has attained a kind of mythical status. And that's not just because it now acts as home to the Hawthorne Association. It's because that's how Hawthorne himself thought of it. I found a letter he wrote to his sister Louisa when he was living in Salem in 1820. And he sounds like a sappy kid. Here's what he says. "But I shall never again run wild in Raymond, and I shall never be so happy as when I did." That sounds like the setting for an ideal summer childhood. But the house itself is more a hodgepodge, agreeably so. It seems less like a memorial and more like a place for people to hang out. There's an odd mix of furniture in the room. Plush armchairs and a framed poster of Demi Moore playing Hester in the 1995 film version of The Scarlet Letter. And to one side of the large space are several card tables set up in a row lined with collapsible chairs, ready for a neighborhood potluck, community meeting, or a card game. That's what we do. We sit down for a game of authors, which is kind of like Go Fish, but with writers and books.
Do you have the House of Barack, do you have the House of Seven Gables by Hawthorne?
Do you have to have a Hawthorne card, though? Do you have a Hawthorne card in your hand?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
You just asked the wrong person.
Yeah, yes, right.
Do you have the Wonder Book by Hawthorne?
Yes.
And do you have Twice Told Tales by?
It makes sense. It's only right that one of you would get the Hawthorne book.
Of course.
So-
It's only.
Now you gotta read all those books. Now you gotta read all of those, Abel.
I think you're the only one at the table that has.
That's why I'm losing. While we're playing cards and joking around with Tom and Abel, we also talk about their hopes for the house. Because after decades of being active members in the Hawthorne Association, they're still working on realizing their dream for it.
Originally, what I had thought we could do is to say, make this your headquarters, and we'll give you a locker upstairs. You keep all your stuff. But that hasn't panned out yet. But
But that would be the ideal. You
We
want to
wanna-
get to a point where people kind of make this into their own space.
yeah. But like right now, as a matter of fact, I was just talking to the Chamber of Commerce this morning. Business Break, the June issue is available. So I nominated us together with the Fuller to do the Business Break in June.
The Business Break is a networking event for local merchants. It's where they get together, drink beer, eat pizza, and talk shop. Is that something Hawthorne would have wanted to happen in his historical home? Probably not. But the Hawthorne House in Raymond is unique among the writers' houses we visited. It's as much a place for the community to spend time in as it is a place where the community can learn and think about Hawthorne.
Because there are a lot of things that happen in this community where we need each other, So it's kind of a great way to get to know everybody.
There aren't that many year-round residents in Raymond. It shouldn't be hard to get to know everyone, except that there aren't many gathering places. The town hall is mostly a place to apply for permits, and it's housed in the same building as the overcrowded community school. That's why the association offered up the Hawthorne House to host a recent town meeting. The district representative, the district senator, and the zoning code enforcement officers all came to the house to talk about their shared problems.
And because we've had some problems with a number of owners of the buildings on the lake who've kind of ignored the zoning. And so the town has to go out and try and fight this legally. And that takes a lot of money.
The towns around Sebago Lake have been having problems with summer residents who ignore the environmental rules.
In a lot of cases, the communities are even more strict than the state, but we have no enforcement power. And so small towns like Raymond and all of the towns around the lake, we just can't afford to fight some of the deep pockets that can just, it's cost of doing business. I'll just do what I want and let them find me.
So, all this talk about the individual and the community, this remind you of anything, Tess?
It does. It reminds me of the Scarlet Letter.
Yeah, and everything else, every other conversation that's ever been had about America is writ small by Scarlet Letter.
I know, but the Scarlet Letter just does it so much better than everybody else. It's Hester against the community.
Yeah, but it doesn't, that's true, right? So if everything was as well done in our culture as Hawthorne makes it, but, it doesn't actually track with what Abel and Tom are saying. So we're not saying that in Scarlet Letter, the community is this source of normalization, oppressive normalization. So you're not saying that's true of Tom and Abel, because if so, let's get Tom and Abel in here and let them speak for themselves.
Well, that's not all the community is. I mean, even in the Scarlet Letter, yeah, there are the ugly gossips who want to crucify Hester Prynne and all that. But there's also some nice people in the community who want to protect her, and that's why she's wearing the Scarlet Letter in the first place instead of executed.
Yeah, I do love that moment early in the book where the gossips you're talking about, they begrudgingly praise the quality of the A that Hester's made for herself. So Hawthorne's, he's funny about this.
Oh, Hawthorne is very funny about the community and what they're trying to do to Hester, and they're all ugly and she's beautiful, and that's part of the problem.
Hester Prynne, so that all men may know you are guilty of the sin of adultery and shun you as a thing of evil, it is now ordered that you shall wear upon your bosom for the rest of your natural life the Scarlet Letter A.
So, Hawthorne's so associated with Salem, and when I think of, he's has a long family tie-in with the Salem witch trials. So his great-great-grandfather was involved with them in some way or another.
That's what he says in the Custom House, the preface.
Right, yeah. And I see Salem, obviously, in Scarlet Letter. I mean, I see that's the town I think of. But we're talking about Raymond now, too.
And any small New England town, they're all kind of the same, aren't they?
That's what I was going to ask you, what your sense of it was. Does Raymond seem the same as Salem?
Well, they don't make as big of a deal about Hawthorne than they do in Salem. Like, you go to Salem and Hawthorne is everywhere.
Right.
Whereas Raymond, it's just a kind of nondescript town. It's got a lake. It's got a bunch of old people living in it. It's, and they get together.
Yeah,
That's what's kind of cool about small towns in New England, is that people actually get together in the same way that they did back when Hawthorne was around.
I don't want to slur on Salem at all, although I kind of will, right? It's all witches and it's all Hawthorne.
Yeah, it's all about Halloween.
Yeah. Whereas Raymond, it's not about any of those things. Like, you would not know. But this is praise. You wouldn't know that Hawthorne's there, except if you knew about that house or you drove past it.
Exactly.
You saw, for some reason, the plaque.
And maybe what you're saying is it's better that way, that the house is so hidden away. There aren't all these signs saying Hawthorne sign this way.
Yeah, that'd be hilarious if there's a Hawthorne sign this way and there were a big witch around it. Or just him as like an 11-year-old hanging out there. We could twain him up. We could huck him up and put him in like ragged short pants.
What are you talking about here? Like a Hawthorne dummy, a Hawthorne doll?
Some
kind of AI created Hawthorne figure?
Right, Hawthorne hologram. All these things that would horrify him, the most private man in 19th century American literature. And
exactly.
Let's make him a fantasia, a phantasm.
So we're in Raymond, we're hungry, and we don't know anything around there, but we look it up on our phones, and the first thing that comes up is Eric's church. It's open, and we decide to go there. We pull up at Eric's church, which oddly is in a quiet strip mall, and we walk into a large, almost empty bar with a huge dance floor and country music blasting. Emma Forg, the bar manager, takes our order. And she gives us an idea of what the place would be like if only we were there in the evening, say around 10 o'clock, instead of a Monday at lunchtime.
And on Thursdays we do karaoke, which is usually a mess. But
do you ever, like when you're working here, do you karaoke as part of it, or are you?
No, I wish, but
it's not allowed.
Right.
Yeah.
How long have you worked here?
I've worked here for 3 years.
And do you live around here?
I do. I used to live in Gorham, but that was kind of a commute up to here.
Yeah.
So I moved up to the Windham area just recently, and it's been a life changer.
Yeah. What's it like living up here?
It's amazing. The community up here is just so much different than anywhere else I've ever been. And it just translates to this place too. Like the regulars that we have and the people that come in here are just amazing people. And we have a lot
It definitely seems like Raymond and Wyndham have amazing people, at least based on our sample size of 3, Abel, Tom, and now Emma. And like Tom and Abel, Emma has also read The Scarlet Letter in school, but nothing else by Hawthorne. And she had no idea that he spent part of his childhood just up the road from where she works.
5 minutes of the birthplace of a major
That
American
is,
author.
I did not know that.
Yeah.
That is awesome.
Yeah.
That is really cool.
Yeah.
In Raymond, you said, right?
In Raymond, right in
Wow.
it's on Hawthorne Street, which is right, I think it goes right into the lake.
I did not know that.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so cool.
So you can imagine if you're on a jet ski in the lake anytime soon and you look over there and you think that's the home of a major American author and you leave a little spray in the jet ski.
Let's go back to the mid-19th century when Herman Melville, author of Moby Dick, first met Nathaniel Hawthorne. It was a beautiful summer day when they decided to climb Monument Mountain in the Berkshires. There were a bunch of other writers there, but that's not important. Hawthorne was 46. He was a really attractive but painfully shy, brooding writer. You know the type. And he was already a celebrity. Melville, whose debut novel had made him a literary star in his 20s, had just turned 31. And Hawthorne had published his collections of short stories, Mosses from an Old Manse, about a year earlier. And Melville found it exhilarating. The rest, as they say, is history. Or what I would call maybe American literature. I mean, would there be American literature without Hawthorne and Melville getting together? Chris Batchelder and Jennifer Habel have written the novel Day's Work, which describes in beautiful detail the Melville-Hawthorne friendship. Chris is a novelist and Jen is a poet, and they're married to each other. This is the first book that they've written together. And they did it during the most intense period of COVID lockdowns when they holed up at home with their 2 daughters and dog. Day's Work is about Herman Melville, but you can't really talk about Melville without talking about Hawthorne. They were friends. At least they had a short and intense friendship while they were neighbors in Pittsfield, Massachusetts. The book came out of Jen's obsession with Melville. And of course, houses, because houses play into a question Jen and Chris like to think about: how art gets made.
The conditions it's made under, and the homes are so much a part of that. And to what extent you're happy in that space, to what extent you yourself are responsible for taking care of that space or paying for that space, decorating that space. Do you have your own private space inside that space, which is your private sanctuary? Hawthorne apparently had a sky parlor in one of his houses, which seems perfect.
What does that mean?
The tower.
It was a tower, basically.
It sounds pornographic.
Yeah, I know. He had it built, I think, and he called it his sky parlor. And that's where he would go up to write, I don't know. I really just like thinking about this. I don't know why, really.
And even if Jen can't exactly say why she's so curious about where and how writers write, she knows she is. So when the lockdown let up, her and Chris traveled to Arrowhead, the house in Massachusetts where Melville wrote Moby Dick.
Well, the items too, like we quote Julian Barnes, whatever, why aren't the books enough? Why do we hound the writers? But it's really hard not to see these things as just talismanic or glowing when you enter these spaces. It's really hard not to, you kind of know better that the work should stand for itself. But it was great to be in Arrowhead. It was magical to be in Arrowhead. It was, incredible. And I think the other thing is the book is trying to negotiate or is interested in the two poles of like domesticity and adventure, and so Melville, who goes out on the ocean and comes home to a house full of just a bunch of women, so far so far from the sea. It's snowy and he's looking out, so I think we're interested in houses too, especially during the quarantine. We're just, we're on an adventure together trying to write this book, but we're, it's completely domestic.
And it is this talismanic quality that we're really talking about here. Does being in a writer's house change anything about how we read the books, or whether we read them at all? And in this case, would it change how Jen and Chris wrote their own book? That is our question, especially since Jen and Chris are following up their collaborative Melville novel with a Hawthorne one. This time, there's no lockdown to prevent them from going straight to one of Hawthorne's homes in Maine or Massachusetts. But Chris doesn't feel that they need to go to Raymond to write the book.
It's just us at this point, and I can't imagine this changing. It's a relentlessly interior book. The setting is this guy's head. He's the guy in Day's Work. I suppose it's loosely based on me, I suppose, but he's on the periphery in Day's Work, somewhat aloof. So we just wanted to explore this guy, but he's very, very interior, and so it's lightly plotted, but it's mostly him considering at middle age these issues of being inside of a system versus struggling to get outside of a system, and the costs associated with each.
So, I mean, it really is just sort of has a spirit of Hawthorne behind it, as opposed to being about Hawthorne in any way or being research-based. So it's really just entirely different that way.
Yeah, and Wakefield looms back there, the story of Wakefield.
Wakefield is maybe Hawthorne's spookiest work of fiction. A short story about a London man, Wakefield, who tells his wife that he's going to be away for a few days, and who then disappears. That is, his wife doesn't know where he is. But the reader knows that he's just moved into an apartment around the corner where he lives for the next 20 years, only then to walk back into his old house with a crafty smile, which was the precursor of the little joke that he has ever since been playing off at his wife's expense. And why does he do this? Is he cruel? Is he lost? Is he crazy? Does he himself know? Does Hawthorne? This is the most disturbing aspect of the story, the sense of unknowability, and it's exactly what has drawn Chris and Jen to the story and to its author.
There's so many quotes about Hawthorne. Everybody who met him sort of nailed him down and just said, this guy is a ghost. He keeps his feelings under his feet. It just over and over these amazing quotes about how aloof and withdrawn he is.
Yeah, one of the quotes I was remembering was that Hawthorne wrote at age 53, "I doubt whether I've ever really talked with half a dozen persons in my life, either men or women." But I think Melville was one of the people that he did talk with.
Jen, you were mentioning that you got sort of obsessed during COVID, during lockdowns and all that with Melville. So I take it you're not as obsessed with Hawthorne? He hasn't inspired that kind of obsession for you? What is your feeling about Hawthorne? Just sort of like personally, what you said you guys aren't spending research. You're not researching Hawthorne the way you did Melville. So what is Hawthorne doing for you?
He's initially we thought we might actually have him be a ghost in this book, an actual ghost, and he's not going to be, but there are ghosts.
Literally.
Yeah, but there are sort of ghosts through the book, and I think he's existing as this, well, people described him as a fine ghost in a case of iron. Like he's sitting there as this sort of like unattainable, alluring, well, obviously I don't know what he's doing, but that's actually a good place to be in when you write a book. You actually I think maybe we shouldn't know exactly.
He doesn't inspire. I mean, obviously Melville, the Vortex, Melville inspires mania among many people, and I guess we got to that place too. And Melville is lovable in this way, even though he's there's really unsavory things about Melville. Hawthorne is harder. He's not so cuddly, he's really, and he said some incredibly cruel things. And he's just more difficult to, if you think about it, I'm going to study Hawthorne and write a novel about him. I mean, you could, and could do it well and it'd be interesting, but he's harder. I think he's a harder figure to spend that much time with.
Not so cuddly is an understatement, as this passage from Wakefield makes clear. Amid the seeming confusion of our mysterious world, individuals are so nicely adjusted to a system, and systems to one another, and to a whole, that, by stepping aside for a moment, a man exposes himself to a fearful risk of losing his place forever. Like Wakefield, he may become, as it were, the outcast of the universe.
This tension that Jen and Chris are describing between being immersed in something, a family, a neighborhood, a religious community, or standing on the outside of the system, is one of the recurring themes of both Hawthorne's writing and our visit to the Hawthorne house in Raymond. The house doesn't pretend to provide some great insight into Hawthorne, the way he thought, the way he wrote.
So are you a musical fan?
I am.
Yeah,
I'm
good.
very much a musical fan. Yeah, it's my favorite form of entertainment, I must say. Okay. And I can sing a lot of musicals.
Really?
Yes.
What's your favorite song? Wait a minute. I do.
So many
What's your favorite? You don't have a favorite Hawthorne story, but you might have a favorite song.
Well, I mean, I've often walked down the street before. I love that one. I like the Pajama Game. I don't know if you know 70s I'm trying to think now. It was started with 7.5 cents doesn't buy a hell of a lot. 7.5 cents doesn't mean a thing. But give it to me every hour, 40 hours every week. That's enough for me to be living like a king. I forget that. And then it goes, oh, so much money. Wow, that's enough for me to be a sultan in the Taj Mahal, in every room a different doll, not to mention a 40-inch television set.
Tom,
I feel like our work here is done.
yes. Tom, I got an idea. You got to write the musical for the Scarlet Letter. It hasn't been done yet, and I think you're the guy.
The house, according to Abel and Tom, is being preserved as a center of a community that needs and wants a center. Hawthorne is the excuse for the community, even if that community is precisely one of the things that made Hawthorne wary. You've listened to Dead Writers with me, Tess Chicalico.
And me, Brock Clark. Our managing producer and editor is Lisa Bartfi.
Cedric Wilson has created our theme music and mixed the show.
Ella Jones is our web editorial intern.
And a very special thanks to our generous sponsors, Bath Savings, and listeners like you.
You can find more information about the writers, their books, and their houses at our website on mainpublic.org. Thanks for listening.